Oftentimes, resetting involves taking a chance without knowing all the answers, and that's scary. And that's how it was for Susan Oguche. Now, she is the Executive Vice President and Chief Communications Officer for the Cleveland Cavaliers. But she had an impressive job with Nike before that, and she'd gone through some turbulent times personally. So how did she know to grab that chance in front of her? In this week's The Reset, Susan shares more about giving yourself grace while leaning into opportunity. So when we talk about what your reset is, what made you decide to come here? That was a reset for you in a way, was it not?
Absolutely. I think it was, in some ways, kind of blind faith. Last year, one of my sort of mantras was, I'm betting on me. And it was coming out of a year where I had a lot of sort of personal tragedy. My father passed away. I was pregnant with my youngest, and I had a really, really rough pregnancy. And just trying to navigate all of that and find time for myself and prioritize, myself, just sense of like, life is really unfair and like tomorrow isn't promised and you can't guarantee what's gonna happen. And I had a sense that I had put a lot of stuff on the back burner. And so, I came back from maternity leave. I applied for a new job internally at my previous company. When everyone's like, you come back from mat leave, you kind of like coast, you take it easy, and I was like, no, I want to try this different job and try to see how to navigate all of that, and had a really incredible time there. And I was like, well, what else can I do? Where else can I make an impact? And it was just in this season of like, okay, if I'm betting on me, like, where does that take me? And I had a recruiter actually reach out for this role, and I, didn't have the typical background that someone had. Most of my communications experience had been more in sort of the consumer products space. But I said, you know what? If it doesn't work out, I have an incredible role at a great company. I have a supportive boss. I'm doing work that matters. And if it works out, like, cool. And I think, yeah, so that's essentially kind of what led me to pursue the opportunity. But the more I learned about the team, the more I learned about the culture and what they were building here, the more I met the leaders and the work and the people I was going to be able to work with on a daily basis. It went from like, oh, that could be interesting, to like, I really want this. Like, I feel like I could make an impact. I feel like this would be a really great move for my family. I feel like I have something to offer.
So I know your daughter is 6 and you've got a 1-year-old as well.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the pressure as a mom and a breadwinner to balance those, especially when you're considering a move, because it's not as though you moved from Michigan.
Right. Yeah, I made the move from Portland, so it was a little far. Mm-hmm. I felt a lot of pressure because this isn't our first move as a family. We moved from Chicago to Portland, which was another, very, very far move. And Chicago was a place where we had really deep roots. We had my husband's brother lived there. We were really involved in our church community. My mom and my brother were there. And so it wasn't a move that we took lightly to move all the way to Oregon. And then, 3 years later, we're contemplating another relocation cross country. So I felt a lot of pressure from that. But I think and I'll answer about my daughter, but I think my husband and I were in unison on that. We felt like it was just the right time in terms of their age, where we were like, okay, it's my daughter is kind of in the middle of first grade. It was the early part of her sort of academic career. So I'm like, if we're gonna make a move, this feels like a good time. And it was the opportunity to come back to Ohio, where I grew up, and just remember having such a wonderful upbringing that I took for granted. Like, I just remember when I was, I went to junior high and high school in Cincinnati and went to Ohio State, came back and lived in Cincinnati, worked at Procter & Gamble for a number of years. And I just felt like it was so boring. I was like, I haven't, you know, like there's such a big world out there, and I'm just like here in Ohio, and I like grew up here and went to high school here, went to college here.
So it's all you knew.
It was all I knew.
Somebody
like,
opened a door to something else.
I'm like, there must be this like bigger world out there. But it was in the process of going away, and I think there's so many boomerangs now. I meet so many people who are like, I grew up in Cleveland or grew up in Columbus, and they're coming back because that what we thought was really boring and you know, uneventful as like a kid growing up and just like wanting to be in the big city was just such a beautifully protected, safe way to grow up. And I longed for that, just like being in a place where, you know, like you can ride your bike around until the sun comes down and your mom's calling out the front door. And I just remember being able to have just a depth of friendship and community. That's something, I mean, I'm sure it's all over the world, all over the country, but I just had such fond memories of having that here in Ohio and in the Midwest. And I wanted that for my kids.
So would you say that moving back here was a reset for you?
Oh, absolutely. In so many ways. I think it was a reset in terms of like just our family dynamic and the neighborhood we live in, the job that I have. But I also feel like in a lot of ways it's like a process of me sort of coming back in alignment with like what I value, where I think my skills are, my talents are, the type of community I want to be part of, the type of impact I think I can make. So I think it's both a reset and a sort of re-emergence.
Rebirth?
Revisiting, rebirth. I think that's all of those things.
You've talked to me about anxiety, and I get that because I think it's rampant right now among so many of us. How did it flare up during this time? Because there's a lot of back and forth in making a decision to move your family like that.
Well, I mean, it's something that I have kind of dealt with my whole life. So I remember sort of my process with anxiety, not knowing there was a name for it, but just being in college and just feeling like my chest was closing up. And I was like, what is this thing that's happening to me? I was in the back room of a large lecture hall at OSU. And fortunately, I had been a university ambassador, tour guide, so I knew that we had these like mental health services. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm not having a heart attack, even though it feels like it. I walked straight into the student health center and was like, I need to talk to somebody, like something's going on, I don't understand it. And it took a while for me to be able to say, I have anxiety. There's just so much stigma to mental health, and especially in my cultural background, like you don't want to put a name on yourself. You don't want to put something negative, you know, and say like, I have anxiety. It's like, it feels so permanent. But I think going through the process of just understanding and you know, the counseling I've gone through, the support I've had from my family, it's something that I'm very conscious of, and I've been able to sort of navigate, but it's always there. It's like this ever-present thing. One thing that I've been able to do, and I think it came to bear in this instance as well, is I kind of have gone from thinking of it as this like horrible affliction to also kind of thinking about it as like a superpower and trying to listen to what that's telling me. If I'm anxious about something, is it because I don't have the right information? Is it because maybe my gut's telling me it's the wrong decision that I need to pay attention to that? Or is it saying that maybe it's not the right time? And so I've been able to tap into that. And if I can go through that questioning process and not like running away and trying to like barge through it, but saying, okay, what am I feeling and why am I feeling anxious about a situation or about a decision? I can address it in a different way. I feel like I can reclaim my power in that sense. And I feel like that's what happened in this situation. I felt hugely anxious about it, but it wasn't because it wasn't the right move.
I love how you say you essentially stopped looking at anxiety as a detriment and as a superpower, because it does kind of ignite something in you to alert you that, okay, wait, I need to look more closely at this?
Absolutely. And I think for this situation, it was, people call it imposter syndrome, but it was just me like, can I do this? Am I willing to put in like the personal sacrifice that's required? I left my mom and my brother back in Portland. How's my family going to adjust? I'm moving my kid in the middle of the school year. Like, does this make me a bad parent to be doing this? And going through that kind of painful process was really great because I was able to find answers to all of that and push through.
Okay, I want to ask you something because
Yeah.
I know that what you just said, people are going to connect with.
Yeah.
When you say you were able to find answers, how did you find your answers?
Yeah.
Was it through just introspection? Was it through
Yeah.
quiet time? Because moms don't get a lot of quiet.
Yeah.
Especially working moms don't get a lot of quiet time.
Prayer was a big part of it. And I think, like I mentioned in the beginning, being in alignment with my husband, like this was not a decision we took lightly. We both had a lot of time for prayer and reflection. And the interview process was, it took some time. So I had a lot of opportunity to really reflect on if this was the right next move for my family, if this was the right opportunity professionally, if this was the type of organization that I wanted to be part of and sort of use my time and talents and put towards. But I think at the end of the day, that idea of like, I'm going to bet on me. And I think someone's actually, I'm just remembering, like, one of my mentors at Nike said, you have such a diverse set of skills. If you want to come back here, if you want to go somewhere else, if you want to do anything, you can do it, but you're only going to get this opportunity once. And that sense that, okay, if I say I'm betting on me this year, I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna bet on myself. I'm gonna bet on my family's ability to be flexible and to adapt. I'm gonna bet on God's ability to have my back, and to be preparing a way for me in this. And I'm gonna take a chance. And there's a word that my friend always uses. I don't know if it's a real word or they made it up, but she calls me like counterphobic, which I think it's the idea that like most people when they're phobic of something, if you have a fear of spiders or a fear of heights, like you run away from it, right? Like you avoid it because it causes such a sense of anxiety and like inner turmoil. And being counterphobic is like running into it, running through it. And it's such a faith-filled posture. It takes it from, I don't have all the answers, so like I'm gonna trust the fear, and I'm just like not gonna act, or I'm gonna act the opposite. And it says, you know what? I don't have all the answers, but I'm trusting that there's like something in this for me. I'm trusting my ability to kind of ask all the questions, and like knowing that there's gonna be a ton of answers that I don't have. And I'm trusting, as a person of faith, I'm trusting that God's on the other side of that. And regardless of what happens, there's purpose in it for me, that nothing in life is going to be wasted. And I think it was that same little morsel of that sent me to pursue an opportunity outside of Ohio, like about 10 years ago. And I think it's that same thing that brought me back. And it was such a full circle moment in that sense of like, when I first moved to Boston, I'm like, I don't know anybody in Boston. I've never lived anywhere else as a functioning adult, but I'm going to trust that there's something in there for me. And I'm going to have enough humility to know that I can't predict every single answer, and there's going to be a leap of faith that's required in that.
So how do you think, like a lot of us, we feel like it's all on us?
Yeah.
Like we are carrying all of this, and we've got to figure it out. How did you release that?
Yeah.
But I'm betting you still carry some of it too, right?
I was like, can you feel my shoulders? No, I mean, I
can you feel mine? I know.
I don't think, for me personally, and this is one of the hard truths about having anxiety, I don't think it ever goes away. Like I still wake up in the morning with like, feeling like I'm behind, feeling like there's this list of stuff that I carried over from yesterday that I still haven't done, and there's like 10 things that I know I need to add for the next day and all
You
the
just
questions.
spoke to everybody who's waking up every morning. And it was the most beautiful way of saying it because it was so true. I wake up and I already feel like I'm behind.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know, I think it's kind of back to that humility of being like, I cannot possibly have the responsibility of all of this. And I think there's something, I think we kind of talked before, like the pandemic was one of, if there, talk about a reset.
Yes,
Like-
because if you are a person who feels like you need to exert some control, you had none.
Yeah.
Or you felt like you had none.
I actually had none. I mean, you wake up, and for me, I had just relocated to Oregon. I think I was like maybe 2.5 months into, into that move. My family had been in Chicago, and we were like trying to sell our house, and they had just moved. I think it was like March 10th or either 9th or 10th that they moved. And I think it was like March 13th that everything shut down for just 2 weeks, right?
They had 3 days. They had 3 days.
So they came, and it was like, we were like, should we be wearing masks? But like nobody was really talking about it. And it's like, oh, it'll just like go away.
We all thought that.
Yeah, we were spraying everything down with Lysol. Like I remember paying like $15 for like a little thing of Lysol that I searched every single like hardware store in
That
the
and
city
toilet paper.
Well, the toilet paper one is like going to be, when we're really past this, I think we're all going to have a really good laugh
yes.
about the toilet paper shortage. But just that whole process of not knowing what the future held from a job standpoint. Companies were like making all kinds of decisions about staffing. I was at home with, I think she was like 4 years old at the time, or 3 years old. So we were doing home preschool, which was horrible, while I was on Zoom calls and living in a really small, rental townhouse in Portland. So I think that process, it almost broke me. But it also, I think, birthed a sense of resilience that I did not know that I had.
Did it prove to you that you could do more than you thought you could in terms of not just activity, but acceptance of what was?
Yes, I think it was the sense of like, anxiety feeds off of the like, what could happen.
Right.
That sense of like, there's danger looming around the corner, and like I just need to predict what it is and try to like organize my life like in a way that I can avoid whatever like unknown boogeyman is like hiding around the corner. And I was just like, my mom getting sick, didn't have that on my bingo card. My dad getting sick and passing away, didn't have that, on my card. The whole world being locked down and us all kind of being trapped. And on the West Coast, they were very, very, I think, conservative in terms of like when things opened up and how they opened up and how many people were allowed in venues. They're just now starting to, really open up. And so we were in a part of the world too that, was a little more conscious of the toll of the pandemic than maybe other parts of the world were. And I didn't have anything I could do about it. Like no amount of personal stress or like planning could have prepared me for all of those things. And I think it was a sense of like, that like corny phrase of like, let go and let God. It was just that sense that I had to every single day go to another source of my stability, another source of my, encouragement and solid foundation, because I couldn't depend on my ability to predict everything like I had done for so long. Like this thing that like has been a really nice tool, because I feel like, I don't get surprised by anything because my brain's already thought of the worst case scenario. So like, that was kind of my calling card a little bit. I'm like, I did not anticipate any of this, and I can't do anything to make it stop. And and you go through the sense of powerlessness that is very, very triggering for somebody with anxiety, but I was able to kind of push through that into a sense of like surrender that I try to tap into on a daily basis.
You're also speaking about something that a lot of people went through during COVID in terms of losing somebody, whether it was a wife, a spouse, a parent, even a child.
Yeah.
Have you reconciled that part yet? Because it's hard to lose a parent.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you had time to?
No, I didn't have time because to answer your first question, I don't think I've reconciled it. I feel like the grief comes in waves. I have times where I'm like, man, my dad doesn't get to see, he was a chemist, and we went to the science, I think it's like the Space and Science Museum yesterday, and like my kids were so into it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this would make him so proud because he didn't get the scientists out of me. Maybe these will be the future scientists, and I mourn that he doesn't get to experience that. And I think for anybody who's lost someone, there's always that process, whether it's it's a parent and you're like, oh, they don't get to meet their grandkids, or they don't get to walk me down the aisle, or they don't get to see my graduation or this milestone, or if it's a child and just thinking about just the not knowing who they could become. I don't know. I don't think you ever get past it. But I feel like for me personally, that's where my faith has just been such an encouragement, and the community that I have, and people that I never thought were sort of part of my immediate community came out of the woodworks with such beautiful stories of like knowing my dad when he was in college, and his rambunctious side, or just like with an encouraging word. And I still, depend so much on that, and my siblings and my husband and my family. But I don't feel like I had the time to really fully mourn at the time. My father was in Nigeria. We were in the middle of the pandemic. I flew over there with my whole family for the funeral, which is when I got sick while I was pregnant. And so, I'm in the process. I'm like working with my siblings and my family to do all the arrangements for the funeral, and dealing with the complications of my pregnancy, and having another child that I want to be present for. So it, I don't know that my situation is that unique though, because when you do lose someone, there's all of the other things that are required, whether it's funeral arrangements or, figuring out what to do with their property. And like most of us, we still have to work. We still have to take care of families. We still have, our other responsibilities while we're dealing with grief. But I think it was like last month, I just was like sitting there and I felt a sense of missing my dad in a deep way that I hadn't. This is why I talk about grief coming in waves, because I was literally just sitting there and I was like tearing up, and I'm like, grief sucks. Yeah. In one moment you're just like, oh, this was such a beautiful memory, and and then in the next moment you're just so conscious of what you've lost, and you just don't know where to go from there. But I do feel like with the distance, I have more of the positive memories. Like I can look at a picture of my dad without tearing up. I can reflect on that beautiful memory. And then I also feel a sense of gratitude kind of creeping in slowly but surely, because I look at people who lost parents when they were much younger. My mom lost her mother when I think she was like 5 or 6 years old. So I think about that, and I'm like, my dad was almost 60, and I had all these years with him. And then I go into like, well, who am I not to deal with heartache or grief? But people wake up and deal with unexpected tragedy every day. And so not that it encourages me, but I think just kind of back to, I don't know if it's the theme, but just that sense of like, we don't have control over what happens to us, but like, we can try and manage the way we respond to it. We can try and take the lessons from it. We can try and operate with a sense of gratitude and humility, and I try to exhibit that through it all, and just be grateful for the time that we do have. That's what I will say. I don't know, for people who've lost, like it does give you a sense of like, wow, like tomorrow is not promised. Like, what am I spending my time being upset about this for? Or, wasting my time doing this stuff that's not making this like eternal impact. Like I'm becoming more and more conscious of that piece of it and trying to figure out like, what is my legacy going to be? What am I going to leave behind? Like it could be tomorrow. I hope it's not. I hope I get another.
I hope it's not too.
I hope I get another 60, 70.
Yeah.
But there's no way of knowing. And like I have right now, and how do I treat people, and how do I, not wake up and terrorize my family because everybody's, running behind and everything's everywhere,
Your house sounds very much like my house in the morning. I get it. Yeah. I'm wondering, when you look back at all of this, how did your reset serve you? Do you know? Can you, even, I mean, it's a deep question.
Yeah.
But can you look back and go, this is how I am better because of this that happened to me? Or maybe not better.
Yeah.
But maybe what I've learned, maybe what I've...
Yeah.
How I've pivoted about how I feel about things. How am I different?
I have this idea in my head of what I want to be. In terms of like how I want to treat people. I grew up, a person of faith. I still am. Grew up in church, do unto others. And I think, I don't know, maybe it's the reset plus age, but I'm just being really conscious of like, hey, there's this gap between who I say I am or who I want to be and where I am, and how do I close that gap? And obviously my big reset was moving here, but I feel a deeper sense of purpose in the move. But I think I'm asking a lot more questions, where I would say like, I used to just kind of go about life and like we have these big jobs and you're like, I want my family and I want a spouse and I want like, I'm having a sense of being a steward a lot more, whether it is with work or with my family or in the community. I don't have the answers, but I think this is probably one of the first times in my life where I've been able to ask the questions in a deeper way, where I'm maybe out of survival mode that like anxiety puts you in, this constant state of panic. And trying to be like, what's the bigger purpose? How do I navigate this situation, this conflict, this opportunity in a way that like is true to who I want to be, instead of is like an automatic response? And how do I want to make people feel? I think that was probably, we're talking about my new job and the move to Ohio, but I think probably one of the bigger resets was just losing my father and thinking about the impact that his life made on so many people, people that he probably didn't even know that he touched, and trying to think through like, what is that sort of,
what do you want to leave?
What am I going to leave behind? What's that like path of glitter that like my legacy is going to leave? And I don't have the answers, but like I said, I think I'm asking the questions and trying to be conscious of it. And I think part of it is the slowing down in the morning and the making time for kind of that quiet meditation and trying to think about, how do I want to approach the challenges of the day? How do I want to approach my family, the way that I interact with my kids? And being willing to like, on the back end, be like, I didn't hit it all right today, and having that sense of like, but that doesn't make me bad.
Yes. But that's okay.
But that's okay.
Because nobody gets
because
it right
I'm a
all
work
the
in
time.
progress, right?
We all are.
Yeah. And giving grace to myself in a way that I don't think I've ever really been able to do. Like, as hard as anyone's ever been on me, like 10 times harder on myself. Self-critical to the max, replaying every single interaction. And that sense of giving myself grace has allowed me to give people grace, because I'm like, who's perfect? Anybody? Nobody. None of us. And just being able to try it again tomorrow and give it my best efforts and know there's grace to cover all of it.